Good morning to people from Europe and good afternoon to people from Middle East and India. It gives me a great pleasure in welcoming you all for the webinar focused on supply chain resiliency and recovery for the new future. My name is Karthik and I lead the CPG and distribution industry solutions in Sonata. I'll be moderating this webinar for this session. So in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was one concept that kept surfacing and echoing among supply chain experts, which is resilience. Many experts urged companies to increase agility and build resilience to exit the crisis stronger than before, and others argued that supply chain resilience was the key to recovery. Some more urged their clients to rethink current supply chain resilience and reconfigure operations for the future. And many others explained that in the post COVID-19 world, building flexibility and resilience has gone from one priority among many to business critical. But what disrupts supply chains? What does it mean to resilient? And how can supply chain improve their resiliency? Let us learn some of the answers to these questions today in this webinar through our speakers. So before we start, I would like to give a small introduction to the speakers and hand it over to them. We have Mr. Balu Srinivasan, who is our keynote speaker, who is going to give us lots of insights on emerging trends that are reshaping the global supply chain landscape. Balu is a supply chain and distribution industry veteran, comes with over 30 years of leadership experience with companies like Ford, TVS, Ashok Leyland, Unilever, and Pfizer. He is a leader in pioneering a model and transforming it into center of excellence. Welcome, Balu. We also have Mr. Rami Fairs, who will take you through how companies can embrace digital, drive resilience, and achieve a future-ready supply chain. Rami is a director of retail and CPG industry for Middle East and Africa and Microsoft. Rami is a seasoned executive in the technology industries with broad experience in all aspects of sales, marketing, business development, strategy development, distribution, and alliance. And Rami has been providing insights on retail and supply chain over 20 years as a prominent speaker in various forums. Welcome, Rami. And we also have Mr. Hanuman Teneti, who will take us through a unique approach to intelligent supply chain transformation from Sonata. Hanumant is a competency head for retail and CPG industry in Sonata, with over 22 years of professional experience in serving CPG and distribution industry in the digital transformation journey. Welcome, Hanumant. I hope this webinar will bring lots of insights on rethinking supply chain strategies, adopting emerging technologies to limit the severity of current disruptions. Just a note on the housekeeping stuffs. All the participants' microphone will be in mute state for the rest of the session. We will open for Q&A in the last 15 minutes, where you can post your questions in the chat window and get answered by our speakers. Thank you. And with this, I'll hand it over to Balu. Balu, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Karthik. Good morning and good afternoon, friends. It's my pleasure to be in this panel to share some of my thoughts on supply chain resilience. I'm always passionate about the supply chain and have been fortunate to work in diverse industries, learning about and also contributing to implementing the technologies to automate and optimize several aspects of the supply chain. Before I jump into this interesting topic of supply chain resilience, I would like to have a quick look at the reality of any supply chain, irrespective of the industry. As you see, there are two sides to this supply chain. One is the demand side. On the screen, you see distributor, retailer, empowered consumer on the demand side, and the supply side, which is the grower, manufacturer, and the transporter. On the demand side is dictated predominantly by the customers, who have ever-changing aspirations and needs. Thanks to people like Amazon and other marketplaces who keep raising the bar in terms of the customer expectations. The customer wants things immediately. Gone are the days when the seller talk about minimum batch size and the delivery period, etc. They want it just immediately. It's not just the delivery, and customer also want to find out where his or her product is on the way till the delivery boys comes to his doorstep. It's almost like looking for views and looking for likes as soon as you post something on the Facebook or LinkedIn, irrespective of the time or place from where you actually post. The other aspect is most of the shipment is free. I really do not know how Amazon makes money. Hats off to their CFO. Another thing that is coming up is the personalized service and personalized products. It's actually the N:1 relationship where N sources are actually aggregated to meet one customer requirement. It's more of a model of co-creation by the seller and the consumer together. So when I actually talk about this demand side on the supply side, in most of the cases, it is dictated by the demand, but things have been actually changing a lot. Thanks to the global reach, thanks to third-party manufacturing, and it is not just the demand forcing you to think how to get supplies. It is also giving you lots of opportunities in terms of looking at the various things in the supply side in terms of the global sourcing, third parties, raw material, price fluctuations, availability, etc., to really come up with some new models and also create some new markets. Things like the seasonal availability and price fluctuations, especially in the farm sector, driving business models to buy to stock and make money by producing end products with consistent quality to the consumer across the years. Also, some of you might have heard innovative buying and payable models to stay lean and mean, whereby the supplier payment is actually linked to the end product coming out of the assembly line. Things like the automobile companies paying the tire suppliers or paint suppliers based on the number of vehicles coming off the assembly line instead of paying them based on what's actually supplied. Now, for us to understand how to make the supply chain resilient, we need to understand what makes the supply chain weak and why are we actually talking about the resilience here. Let's deal with some of the threats to the supply chain in the next slide. Now, supply chain threats come in different forms, different sizes, but they all can be classified under three areas. Basically, global or at industry level, then at an organization level, and at the individual supply chain level. Now, at the global or industry level, things like the buying pattern changes to the political atmosphere, or regulatory changes, or changes to the demography, environmental changes, natural disasters, and the pandemic outbreaks like the one we have been going through since early last year. So this is actually the big thing which is completely outside the control of the organization. Of course, the organization should be able to make the supply chain resilient to really manage this threat. At an organization level, things like the shrinking product life cycle and even the customer life cycle. The customer doesn't want to stay online for more than, let's say, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or his span of attention, people say it's only a few seconds or few minutes, and depending on the stickiness in your website, etc. So at an organization level, some of the things like the complex supply chain, then the plans which are actually deferred or shelved because of some cost reduction initiatives, or even capital outlay reduction and cost saving pressures, they really have significant supply chain impact. So people keep saying that supply chain is pretty important, but whenever there is actually a cost reduction, this could be actually one of the areas where people say, look, you keep actually doing some cost control mechanism here to save some dollars. At the individual supply chain level, the day-to-day parameters like demand variability, supply failures, inventory shortages, product recalls, and the poor visibility to information on things like stocks, sales, and competitor activities. They also play havoc to the supply chain on a day-to-day basis. As you can appreciate, all these have been there for several years, and we were somehow managing. But the term resilience gained momentum in the past few years and gained ample importance in the past 1 year, thanks to the way things turned topsy-turvy in the past 1 year with COVID and the pandemic outburst. Now, we actually went through a bit of information on the kind of threats, and I also mentioned about the classification of the threats into these three areas. Now, let me dwell a bit on the three stages in which one can manage the threat in the next slide. Now, the first stage, the CFOs take complete commercial control with business leaders trying to run the operations with minimum disruption. As you know, people cannot say there will not be any disruption. Disruption will be there. Only thing is the companies can actually try to minimize the disruption. Then in stage two, come up with new ways to bounce back. Come up with new delivery models, like Hindustan Unilever's Shakti model to distribute in rural market. That actually started off as a CSR initiative a couple of years back, but today it has become the model for rural India. So they are actually bouncing back in the rural model, rural market by actually going for this Shakti model for distribution. The same with the work from home, which used to be a business continuity plan. That's actually used by the companies to come back to normal. So that's actually the stage two. Then in stage three, what really happens is when all these things are going on, the competition is actually hotting up, and there is competition coming in from the other industries and unexpected quarters. So definitely the organization has to innovate to do something different to stay ahead of the competition. And it actually calls for a lot of intelligence with respect to what's happening in the market, and also the openness and grit to try something new and manage the uncertainty. So these are the three stages in which an organization go through to stay resilient to manage the threat. In the past, whenever we talk about resilience, whenever we talk about supply chain efficiencies, we always used to do two things that could actually help us to handle or manage the threat or risk much better. So that is what actually I'm going to cover in my next slide. So I call them as resilience levers. Now, our experience has shown these two concepts will help us to achieve stage one and stage two to manage the threat. The first one is optimization. Look at the supply chain holistically and not in compartments like inbound, outbound, manufacturing, etc. And you should have the holistic model to really optimize every bit in the supply chain, starting from buying down to location of plants. Now, in fact, that also includes the location of warehouses. It includes the location of distribution points, transportation methods, transshipment methods, and also even the markets to penetrate. Now, there had been models used by FMCG companies or distribution companies using operations research or using heuristic algorithms to really optimize things. The other one being agility, acting at speed of thought, the continuous sensing of different parameters like the demand, stocks, shelf life, lost sale, competitor actions, etc. This is possible only if the entire organization is wired with perfect alignment and equipped with tools to collaborate anytime, anywhere. So these were the two things which we have been actually using in the past. Now, though these levers to stay resilient remain the same, how they are accessed and how they are applied have become more complex now, thanks to the complexities which we have ourselves introduced because of the empowered consumer and the kind of network which we have actually created. So that's what I'm going to cover in my next slide, where I actually going to talk about what does it actually call for. So the supply chain resilience calls for the redefinition or re-engineering in 6 key areas. The first one is the diversified network, starting from the supply sources, the manufacturing plants where they have to be located, and also engaging third-party manufacturing units and distribution points, and looking at also even options like offshoring, onshoring, nearshoring, etc. So that way you create a lot of redundancy, and that way you actually create a lot of distribution, diverse network points to really get the material in. The next one is by harmonization. What I mean by harmonization is over time, the company actually creates several brands, several packs, several assembly lines. So this is not actually going to help if you want a resilient supply chain. You have to really look at standardization. You have to look at rationalization of the brands. Maybe I think once in a while, we have to really start looking at the various brands and packs and the pack sizes, etc., which we have, so that we can rationalize, harmonize things, and also standardize things across, so that it can be actually the processes can be replicated across the various entities. The third aspect is the easiest one, and it is also the costly one, to create buffer stocks and to create additional capacities to avoid the sales loss. Of course, if you are cash rich, you can do it, but it is not really going to be helpful in the long term. It has a negative impact in terms of cost increase due to unutilized capacities. But at the same time, if we can actually use the ecosystem to really get the kind of on-demand availability of the capacities, on-demand availability of the stocks with some innovative contract to the suppliers, that will be pretty great. The fourth aspect is the smart supply chain. So we actually talk about the smart customer, the smart products, and smart processes. And it has really gained a lot of momentum in the past few years, meant to ensure the proactive responses to all customer demands, sensing what is happening in the market, and real-time and accurate visibility across the extended chain, which actually connects the suppliers as well as the customers. Then optimal synchronization of the network to be cost efficient, then integrating across the entire business from customers, partners, suppliers, and the service providers. Another aspect of the supply chain, the smart supply chain, is the robust control towers. Several companies are actually putting up the central control towers, which actually has the real-time visibility tool to constantly monitor and assess the performance with alerts, timely alerts, and timely nudging, which is to be done to the people in the field level. The fifth aspect is setting up and adopting a collaborative ecosystem where the partners carry out all the activities in a collaborative manner. Even look at the concepts like adopting to shared supply chains. Why do you want to have a supply chain dedicated for your own business? Is there a possibility of using a shared supply chain, co-opting with somebody else? So that's the kind of thing which you can actually look at. And of course, a lot of brick and mortar companies started looking at how they can platform their business. Instead of continuing to really talk about the pipeline model, can they go in for a platformation model? So that's the thing which is really picking up in a big way. And now for all these 5 things to operate, to be successful, you need a cultural change in the company. And as well as you need to have people who are passionate and who are empowered, who like to have continuous communication, open communication, and feel comfortable to deal with uncertainties on a day-to-day basis. So now, whatever tools and technologies you use to handle resilience through re-engineering, redefinition, etc., the basic issues related to data across the supply chain is still a challenge, as you can see in the next slide. I'm speaking out of my experience, having worked in several ERPs and a lot of digital platforms. Of course, data is always a challenge in any enterprise which is complex. Now, I'm just looking at only the 6 aspects of the data management for a resilient supply chain. The product master data has become very, very complex. Maybe around 15 years back, we used to talk about a part number, alternate part number, unit of measure, alternate unit of measure. Today, it has become too complex, thanks to the e-commerce sites. Now we have things like the related items, bundled items, alternate items, unit of measure itself. For every part number, you have at least 3 or 4 different unit of measures. Now it has become very complex. Unless you have a good master data management and a robust taxonomy to connect all these, you are likely to lose out on sales and bottom line. Of course, the supply chain management office should be supported by a very strong product master data maintenance group. The next aspect is whatever we say the data is on time, it doesn't come on time. And even in matured organizations, they have multiple versions of truth. In most cases, data on sales and margins reported by sales and finance do not tie up, mainly due to the cutoff time. Of course, if the cutoff time is the same, it might actually tie up, but because of the cutoff time issues, they actually have this issue. So it is necessary that the data is available on time to the right people to make some meaningful decisions. Now, the next aspect is the consumer. Today, he is actually an empowered consumer. He knows more about your product, more about your service, as well as about your competitor product and competitor service than you. And he also expects personalized products and services. You need to have a good customer analytics to assess what he wants and what he will want to stay in business. The fourth aspect is with all the complexities which the enterprises have created, the regulatory compliances have also become equally complex. So it is too much now and becomes more complex with movement of goods and services across geographies. It is necessary for you to have all the data at the right level to meet this ever-changing requirement. The other one is big data. A lot of people talk about big data. We have been actually talking about it a lot. It's another animal which can guide you very well to take decisions. At the same time, sucks a lot of effort. It's almost like a tsunami sometimes. Managers must be very cautious to focus on the right parts of the big data and then decide about how they're going to use it. So there is no point in getting all the big data and then start analyzing it without really having a clear understanding in terms of what is it we are actually trying to achieve there. Now, when we are focusing on time, accuracy, appropriateness of the data, etc., there is another dimension which is actually very critical. Now, it is actually related to the privacy of the personal data and the breaches by using them wrongly. So the moment actually the consumer knows that you are actually using his data for some wrong reasons, you are actually in for a major trouble. So need to watch out on this equally well in order to manage the resilience. Now, depending on the kind of tools, technology, processes, and culture, different organizations are at different levels of maturity with respect to their supply chain resilience, as indicated in the next slide. I'm going to touch upon the three levels of maturity in a very short time. As you see here, there are three stages an organization may go through with respect to the supply chain resilience. Most of the organizations may be at low to medium or medium stage. It requires a lot of process discipline and collaborative working and strategic partnership to move to a higher level of maturity. As you see here, when you are actually at the third level, most of your processes are actually outside in driven, and you actually work in a matrixed organization with lots of centers of excellence. And of course, you use new technologies with an integrated core in between. And of course, the whole thing is actually extended to the partners up on the supply side as well as on the demand side. Now, as we discuss the maturity, we also need to spend some time on the supporting digital capabilities that will go hand in hand. That's what I'm actually covering in my next slide. Karthik, yeah, sorry. So as you see here, there are basically three circles. So ERP is more than 3 decades old. So ERP still remains. So as an IT person who has been there for around 25 years in the IT field, I will actually strongly advocate for a good transaction system for building all these wrappers and for building all these digital platforms, etc. So ERP is actually going to build the transaction system. But now it is no longer a traditional ERP. It's actually a modern ERP. You need to have an ERP which can be actually translated to a digital platform, and the ERP can be a powerful engine within the digital platform so that the enterprise can actually transform and manage the resilient supply chain in a much better fashion. As you see here, the modern ERP can actually provide the functional integration, can streamline the processes, it can improve the internal productivity, etc. So once you have that transaction system in place, You actually build a wrapper around it, which is with some add-on modules or bolt-on modules, or some modern ERPs may have some of these modules available to really do end-to-end planning, integrated planning, and also do some basic analytics, etc. And that's actually going to result in some significant cost reduction. And then after that, going for some specific industry specific predictive analysis tools, the things like the blockchain, AI, ML, those kind of things, which actually will give more supply chain opportunities, and start working on things like your multi-channel commerce, then the heightened customer experience, and extended value network, and those type of things. So that is the kind of digital capabilities you need to really have to really have the supply chain made more resilient. So that is what I just wanted to cover in my part. And before I close, in the past few years, digital technologies have made huge strides in this area. However, my strong belief is that very few manage to unlock the full potential of these technologies for their supply chain. On the contrary, supply chain is one area where digital opportunities remain the highest. Two things are required to really meet this gap: the right technology solutions and a good partner. These two can actually help you to crack the puzzle and become leaders in the industry. I believe you are in the right place to hear from Microsoft and Sonata and on how they can actually partner with you in your digital journey. Thank you, Karthik. Over to you.
Thank you, Balu. It was interesting to learn the two main levers of resilience as optimization and agility, and also to learn the resilient supply chain maturity levels. And that was interesting to see the different maturity levels there. And thanks for giving an insightful information. Let me hand it over to Rami from Microsoft, who can give some insights on various digital capabilities that can drive resilience and achieve future-ready supply chain. Rami, over to you.
Thank you, Karthik, and thank you, Balu, for this amazing insights, my friend. I'm so proud of partnering with you and the rest of the panelists on delivering this phenomenal session on resilient supply chain. And to be honest, the amount of knowledge that you brought forward is phenomenal. And I hope I can complement this view from a technology perspective and from the Microsoft view on how we want to drive transformation across the retail industry at large, and double clicking further on the supply chain as the core operational practice for all retail business. So before I get there, let me take a moment to zoom out how Microsoft perceive the digital transformation at large across retail and CPG. So in our mind, digital transformation, for it to be comprehensive, to be organization-wide, to realize that it's indeed value benefits and business ROI, it needs to focus on four key pillars. It's about your customers, your employees, your operation, and your business model. We call out your customers' transformation activities. We call it out as know your customers, and this is how we help retailers to shape how they can personalize the experience for their customers across the different channels, whether those digital or physical channels. The second pillar is how to help retailers to further empower employees, whether they are frontline workers or first-line workers or blue collar workers or blue collar or white collars workers, how to empower this information workers to have access to the right information at the right time on the right device. The third aspect of the transformation is about operation, which is the one that we're double clicking on, which we strongly believe at the core of the operation is supply chain. And this is where we focus on helping retailers delivering on intelligent supply chain at large by delivering on all the metrics that Banu has spoken about. We're gonna further double click on those metrics on seeing how technology and how emerging technology specifically can deliver on helping retailers improving on those metrics. And then the fourth pillar is around the business model. And from my perspective, this is actually the pillar that encapsulates all the other three pillars in how we help retailers reimagining their business model, thinking about new revenue stream, transforming some of their revenue streams into recurring revenues, thinking about some of your retail SKUs as a subscription business model, rethinking your store in this context of the store of the future, inserting technology where it does make sense to create this notion of Amazon Go-like experience where you insert technology to remove a customer a customer insertion barrier or remove a customer friction that you have within the customer journey. So all of these pillars are coming together to develop what we call a comprehensive transformation strategy for retailers that allow retailers to bring the intelligent retail business at large and allow retailers as well to unleash the power that Microsoft has built over the years. We have been doing this transformation journey with 92 out of the top 100 retailers across the globe. So if we double click on the view from a supply chain perspective, I want to further expand on Balu's market perception. What are the trends that we're seeing that requires all of us as part of this value chain and parts of the retail business practice across supply chain to deliver on new measures or new business practice? So there is a strong need to develop further supply chain transparency. There is 92% today of your customers, millennials. If we move to the next slide, you will see some key insights about how the market trends are evolving, requiring us to rethink our supply chain practice. I think it is safe to say that pre the pandemic supply chain was optimized for cost and efficiency. Now, post the pandemic, exactly like Banu has referred to, supply chain need to be redesigned for resilience and transparency. Why? Because 92% of your most important retail demographics, millennial, would reconsider buying products from your retail stores or from your brands if they don't find the product that they need available on the shelf. You can further reduce your inventory capex by 20 to 30% by improving your supply chain practice and improving on your replenishment business model and your replenishment practice. It's definitely some of the retailers have witnessed this by seeing during the pandemic, retailers have switched between day and night from retailers across the board to retailers focusing on essential versus not essential brand. Retailers have taken their business from predominantly focused on the physical channel. They found themselves in between day and night only delivering items through digital channels, which have required them to revisit some of their supply chain, because delivering items through digital channel would require you to rethink some of your supply chain practice to further improve your delivery on time, your packaging, your parcel delivery service. All of this have required the retailer to rethink this business model to further reduce the cost of delivering online compared to the cost of delivering in store. 55% of the online consumers are actually willing to pay more for your products if you further show them your commitment to sustainability, your commitment to the good values framework. And this is as well requiring retailers to rethink their commitment to sustainability as kind of a brand preference that that consumers are shopping for today. So if we try to unbundle those market trends and try to connect those market trends with what we think from Microsoft perspective would be an intelligent supply chain practice, we move to the next slide where we talk to you about what is our definition of intelligent supply chain. For us, our intelligent supply chain should focus on 4 key pillars. It should rethink your visibility across the supply chain for you to be able, exactly like Banu said, develop a single source of truth across your data sets, allowing you to better take decisions in the future. And once you have a single source of truth, instead of taking decisions on a more reactive way, you can start thinking predictability. And how can you think predictability? By embedding AI into your business processes or processes. And by developing this single source of truth and embedding AI, you can start to be predictable about your business. And then once you become predictable about your business, you can start thinking about how can I optimize my distribution time to further make the products available on shelf, to further improve on my delivery lead time, to be on par with the digital born players that they're committing to 24 hours delivery service. They're committing to 2 hours delivery service within the same day if you order the item before noontime. And this is all capturing the notion where consumer demand and values that they're shopping for has evolved, thanks to the millennial coming to the shopping space, thanks to the millennial increasing in purchasing power. All the millennial generation, they're considering now sustainability as part of the brand preference when it comes to choosing brands across the board. That's why retailers as well as CPGs at large need to show the customers and deliver on their commitment to sustainability. And we'll talk to you further how some of the retailers are delivering on the sustainability measures. And if you think about the intelligent supply chain from all those 4 key aspects, we will end up delivering on better KPIs across the supply chain business performance indices. Think about the days of inventory, where we can help you reducing the number of days that you held products in inventory. So, and this is a key parameter for you to measure the efficiency between your demand supply and your sales prediction and your sales forecasting and your sales execution. How we can help you reducing the cost per order by reducing the return, by increasing the KPI on delivering orders on time, on quality, at the right value, with the right measures, so you remove the cost of reverse logistics. The perfect rate order is exactly the same idea of cost of order, and this is how you can bring better KPI on improving your profit margin per order, and this will further contribute your gross margin ROI on your total inventory spend or your total capex tied into your inventory as one of your major investment item within your retail recycling business. So if we move forward and we think how Microsoft has delivered this at large, we delivered this by focusing on those four key solution areas. First, we help retailers developing supply chain transparency. So helping retailers to figure out where the product is at a certain point of time, so you can see where your product is through the supply chain, where it's coming at the end of the day to the supply chain for the product to be available at your warehouse, for you to be able to push it to your shelf, so you can predict a bottleneck for you to anticipate those bottlenecks and allow yourself and your organization to work against those bottlenecks, whether by increasing supply chain resilience or increasing the number of suppliers that are available toward the basic specific SKU. Digital planning capabilities, and this is how we help organization to tie together the sales forecast together with your demand planning, together with your inventory planning. So you better replenish your product based on informed decision making rather than decision from the people based on their own personal experience, that we call it decision from the guts. Supply chain optimization, this is where we help organization to deliver on this notion where you can choose your suppliers based on the different KPI parameters that we talked about for you to be able to deliver better improved margin per SKU as well as per product category. And then how we help organization to develop on those sustainable practice, whether it is through renewable energy or through energy management across your different assets, or by helping you to further embrace the cloud so it can contribute to further to your carbon emission footprint reduction across your key operation. So let me share with you a few stories where we have delivered on those key business outcomes at large, just to inspire you and get your mind to think about the potential or the art of possible that potentially can exist between Sonata and Microsoft that we can bring as a value realization to your business. So let's talk about a brand that is mostly close to all of us. I think all of us are coffee fans, and one of the key things that we have enabled Starbucks to create, we have enabled them to create what they call the AI brew platform. So they took the word brewing from the coffee and they allocated it to AI, or they associated it with AI for them to refer to them creating their own technical competencies on artificial intelligence. So when we talk about AI brew platform that Starbucks have created, it has enabled them to supply the right product for the right store at the right time with the right quantity, considering the different preferences that they have across their store network, considering as well the sustainability practice that they want to deliver, considering as well the visibility that they want to bring to their customer, which brand they are using, which bean they're using, where they're sourcing it from, and how much they're committed to good business practice across the board. So by doing this, they have actually reduced their cost of inventory waste across their different stores across the network, and they have increased their sales because they have managed to promote further the commitment to sustainability across the brand. If we shift gears and we move to the grocery retail business, and we have an amazing story to tell with Walgreens. Our story with Walgreens is actually a very interesting story because, as you probably know, Walgreens better than me, Walgreens exists in the proximity of 78% of the US population. Every single US person have within the proximity of 5 miles a Walgreens shop. So this is putting lots of pressure on Walgreens because they get, in average, they get around 8 million individual visiting their stores across the network. So this is putting them in a big matching problem, because they need to provide the right SKU to the right demographics at the right store based on customer preferences. And this is what required them as well to embrace emerging technologies, specifically machine learning and artificial intelligence, for B to be able to aggregate historical data for them to better predict the future and better allocate SKUs on the shelf based on customer preferences across the network. And by enabling this, they have increased customer satisfaction massively across the brand, and they have been able as well to increase sales across their different network of stores. If we shift gears and talk about a very interesting story in the UK, where Morrison, I think this is the fourth largest grocery retailer out of the UK. Morrison have been fundamentally suffering for the availability of fresh products on the shelf. And they have been replenishing shelf products or fresh products specifically on shelf through the guts, through the information available through the retail store manager that is based on people experience without really counting on multiple source of data or customer demographics or what they have been learning based on historical data. So they have worked with Microsoft together with our extensible partner ecosystem, and they have developed again another AI platform that has allowed them to re-replenish product based on what they have seen selling at each time of the year. And by doing this, they have been able to create these correlations between when people are buying products based on what time of the year, based on the seasonality of the business, based on the different social activities that is happening around the corner, based on national holidays. So integrating those third-party data sets into your prediction model further improve your predictability and allows you again to be on par with the digital native players. And this is something very important. That's why digital transformation is going to get a spiral effect. It's not anymore something that we think of as nice to have. It is a must have because our competition are already doing parts of this across their business practice. If we shift gears and talk a little bit about fashion story, and this is a story that is actually very close to my heart because it shows how retailers are committing themselves every day to deliver on sustainability. H&M, they have committed themselves to deliver climate positive change by 2040, and this means that they want across the supply chain to use renewable energy, to reduce their carbon footprint, as well as to increase the efficiency across all their operational practice. And how they worked with Microsoft on delivering some of this KPIs. They have worked with us on creating this renewable energy recycle bin that is connected to a digital screen, and this digital screen allow the consumers today to approach the recycle bin, take a picture on the digital screen or the digital mirror, if you want to call it this way, and based on this picture, the mirror will recommend an outfit, and based on the item that they throw in the recycle bin, they get a voucher or a discount code that contribute to this outfit when it comes to buying this outfit from H&M. And by doing this, H&M is not only collecting recyclable, but as well they are promoting their commitment to sustainability to be relevant to different customer demographics. So allow me to conclude the story after sharing with you all the stories that hopefully would inspire you to further explore better practice around delivering intelligent supply chain by embedding emerging technologies of the ones that we talked to you about, such as AI, IoT, blockchain, and big data at large, like Banu has explained earlier in the discussion. So for us, what we have seen for organization to be successful with digital transformation practice, and Banu has reflected a little bit on this when he called out what are the things that we need to embrace for us to be able to transform our supply chain at large in terms of cultural transformation. So for digital transformation to be successful, we have to make sure that we are activating on 4 key pillars. One, it has to be built on a clear strategy and vision. If you allow me to double click on the next slide, which is actually showing this more in action, where basically we're talking to you about what is the key success factor for a holistic digital transformation across the organization. First, it has to be embraced, sponsored, and communicated properly by the top executives on the organization, calling themselves a sponsor for this key initiative. It has to be coupled with cultural transformation that embrace diversity for us to unleash the unique potential that we have across the organization based on the different personas, different personalities, background, different demographics that we have within our workforce for us to embrace the unique potential of everyone. And it has to be built on us further accelerating capabilities building of our own people. And this is why Microsoft and Sonata, both of us, we proud ourselves We're not here to support you on your digital transformation need for today. We're here to empower you to develop your own tech intensity, for you to develop your own technical capability, for you to navigate your future transformation. So I hope by this we have managed to connect the dots between what are the market trends, what are the emerging technologies available in there, and how you can marry those to drive a digital transformation at large, while double clicking on supply chain as the key operational pillar for you to deliver improved KPI performance to your bottom line. It was a pleasure talking to you today, and I hope everyone found this insightful and useful for your future business consideration when it comes to business improvement, leveraging the power of technology. It was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Rami, for taking the audience through various opportunities driving digital transformation, delivering intelligent supply chain, and in fact, interesting to see some of the companies adopting to the digital levers. So that was wonderful. So let me hand it over to Hanumant from Sonata, who is going to take you through on what Sonata brings in as a unique approach to intelligent supply chain transformation. Hanumant, over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Karthik. So it's been an interesting half an hour or 35 minutes that we've gone through, which essentially has been talking about the emerging trends that we have been looking at from an outside-in perspective, right? We had somebody like Balu who had seen this talking to us, and also we had Rami to actually, where he has extremely well, in a very good way, has explained that how is Microsoft, right, embracing this whole digital drive and the whole resilience, and then specifically with the focus on supply chain. So what I plan to do in the next couple of minutes is to essentially talk about that. Now, considering that this is the way to go, how is Sonata gearing up to deliver, right, these solutions to its customers, and what do we have in our stable of solutions that we can bring, which have helped customers on their digital transformation journey. So what you see over here is essentially an interesting slide, and I'm sure all of you know about it and have gone through this at different stages, is that there has been a lot of change that is essentially happening, right, in the whole supply chain, which is right from earlier you used to have only the typical general trade where you're having wholesalers and retailers and things like that, but now there are a lot of additional channels which have come up, and each of these channels, right, have their own, I would say, nuances, typicalities, and their challenges. And it's very important that the solution that we are looking at, right, can cover all these different changes that are happening in this whole supply chain operations. And towards that, and the other key aspect that we are looking at is how do we ensure that we get consumer intimacy and in the whole process ensure that there is customer delight. So that is a key aspect that we like to cover when we go on as part of the next couple of slides, which essentially are talking about what are the different channels and the major multiple drivers that are there for each one of them. Now, the channel, if you look at each of the channel, right, if you're talking about direct to consumer, right, then the key aspect is about how well do I know the consumer, right? Consumer data. Then in terms of ensuring that how do I get about brand affinity, promotions, and things like that become very critical. When you look at things like a large retail chain, right, which is essentially what is the modern trade aspect, then it is all about how do you support inventory availability. And Rami had talked about a lot about how do you ensure that this is something that the system offers, right? And then the aspect of and then these large retail chains have a unique combination because they are part of the distribution chain, but they are also retailers. So they give you they need the requirements of both the worlds. Then you have the traditional distribution channels, and then you have the marketplaces. So each one of these channels have their own set of drivers, right? And when you look at like what is the platform and how do I offer a single platform that can ensure that the complete all these drivers are managed. So it's important that the platform caters, right, to a single view of the inventory, because you may have inventory at different points during the whole supply chain. How do I manage that? How do I manage pricing, right, and rebates and things like that? So that becomes a key aspect and a key driver. Then the other aspect is around how do I enable digital, right? Now there are multiple ways that you can reach out to your consumer, and it's not just the traditional salesperson going to a shop and then trying to sell. It is now there are different modes that you can come in terms of right from a website to mobile apps to things like that, which is critical for us to look at. Then you have and then you have the other key aspects, right, which are in terms of personalized experience. So in the whole journey of from when somebody is trying to look at a product to actually buying the product, how do I ensure that there's personalization to the whole aspect, right? Time to market is obviously very critical. Then you have the other aspect, which is your post sales, as I mean, how do you provide support, your field sales, your customer service aspects, and things like that. So this being the case, it is important that you get a single view of your operations, which is not limited only to your secondary sales, but also look at tertiary sales and aspects like that. And towards that, what are the solutions that you have? So moving on to the next slide, this is essentially what we wanted to talk about is what we have as a platform, right? That is something that can be used and can help in terms of customers go on their I would say digital journey, right, and digital roadmaps. So let me just take a step back over here and let me tell you what is a platform. Now, when you look at a platform, if you look at a traditional business, what you see on the right side over here, right, it is essentially talking about a linear value chain, right? It is essentially where you have a manufacturer goes to a distributor, and the distributor then go to the retailer, and then retailer to the consumer. So it's a pipe model. Now, what is happening is now that particular model is undergoing a change. So if you look at your Amazons of the world, Balu talked about it right in the beginning in terms of how Amazon is changing the whole view of supply chain, right? So that being the key critical aspect. So how do we ensure that the systems that you have essentially cater to that requirements, right? And so that becomes another aspect, and then it's important that for us to be able to do that, the solution is something that what we call is a platform. So where at every stage there is a value creation that is happening, and because of this value creation, it is important that the different stakeholders that are interacting with the platform are essentially gaining by operating on the platform. So that is the key aspect that we are trying to focus on, and towards that, what we have is our platformation methodology. It's basically what Sonata is our methodology for doing a digital transformation, right? And towards that, it is a transformational approach which essentially help in terms of get these differentiated values, right, to each of the stakeholders. So moving on to the next slide, this sort of gives you a view of what we look at when we say platformation and what are the different building blocks, right? One of the key tenets of platformation is that particular solution or that particular platform is something which is open, which means that it is easily accessible to all the stakeholders, the partners, right, and the different businesses. So it is something that is inclusive, or includes all the people, right? Then the second aspect is that it is scalable. It is infinitely scalable. So it means that irrespective of the number of transactions, number of people coming on that particular platform and things like that, the system can easily scale. And one of the critical aspects in that is, say, for instance, you look at cloud as an example, that it allows you to scale your operations and to easily, right? The other aspect is it should be connected, which means that it is always available for interaction with other different systems in the ecosystems. It not only your system, but it could be your systems which your partners may have in terms of suppliers, it could be your customers, it could be other service providers and things like that. It needs to be easily connected. And finally, it needs to be intelligent, because that is the aspect, is whatever is the data that is getting generated, how effectively and efficiently can we use this. So moving on, what we have is that we have built platforms, what we call as Sonata ready platforms, right, that we have, which essentially help in terms of providing the solutions for which are required for customers. In that, one of the key platforms that we have for supply chain is what we call as modern distribution, right? This is essentially a modern distribution is our own platform that we have built, and this is on top of the Dynamics product from Microsoft, and it adds all the functionality that we've been talking about in terms of being able to be connected, it being intelligent, it being open and scalable, right? And towards that we have, and just like how Rami was mentioning, this is something that we have implemented at different customers, and what we've seen is that for a leading engineered water solutions company, right? So they are essentially manufacturer of water solutions, which is like faucets to and things like that, right? There we have been able to achieve a unified channel experience, right? When they are dealing with the different multiple channels in the ecosystem, and they have been able to build what we call as a platform-based business model, where they have different stakeholders now working on the platform and generating value. Moving on to the next slide, essentially is a quick overview on the Microsoft based modern distribution platform that we have, right? And this is essentially, if you see the bottom layer is where you have the Dynamics 365. So it has the finance and operations. So it takes care of your basic ERP functionality and aspects like that. And on top of that, we have a layer which is called the advanced supply chain, right? Here in advanced supply chain, there are 4 aspects that we are typically covering. One is what is called advanced revenue recognition or revenue management, right? Here you're essentially talking about the whole end-to-end process, right? In terms of being able to see what is your view in terms of the whole end-to-end, in terms of it could be in terms of your availability, it could be in terms of pricing, it could be in terms of rebates, pricing, and aspects like that, right? And how does this lead to being able to pass on, right, whatever is. So you say, for instance, you have landed cost, right? If you know your landed cost properly, then that would help you in terms of deciding what should be the price that you would want to charge to your customer. So things like that is something that advanced revenue management does. Then you have advanced inventory management, which talks about the availability of inventory, the track of availability of inventory at different stages through the whole supply chain, right? Advanced Advanced customer management is where you are talking about advanced order management is essentially where you're talking about the aspect around how you manage the orders and in terms of fulfillment of the orders and aspects like that. And lastly, you have the advanced procurement management, which talks about the procurement of these products. And on top of this, you have what we call as the intelligence layer, which essentially gives you the 360-degree view of the channel inventory and aspects like that. And finally, you have the different channels that are available to the customer. So it's an integrated e-commerce portal. It supplies insights which are required at every stage during operation. It's multi-channel because you have mobile apps and things like that. And aspects, and then finally it takes care of your profitability as well as in terms of your revenue management. So this solution which you have is something that is certified by Microsoft. It is a preferred solution, and it's called an ISV co-sell preferred solution that you have from Microsoft, and it is also something which is Catalyst certified. So this is something that we have. And as I was mentioning earlier, this is something that we have implemented at different customers of ours. Moving on, this is where essentially I sort of come to the end of what I had to talk about from a Sonata standpoint, what we try to bring to bear, and also this is something that we are trying to look at to complement whatever you've heard from Balu in terms of the industry trends which are happening, in terms of what Microsoft is offering in terms of their solutions, right? And to manage your supply chain, and from Sonata side, what we have in terms of for helping customers building a digital supply chain roadmap. And towards this, what we typically offer is that we offer what we call a discovery session to our customers, wherein we can come and it's not a long drawn session, it's a short session of a couple of hours where we then sit across with the customers, understand their priorities, understand the challenges, so that then we can put together a high level solution roadmap, our supply chain roadmap that can be offered. And then we can get into more details in terms of the detailed analysis in terms of how we want to progress and what will be the different aspects that need to be looked at. So with this, let me just pause here and back to you, Karthik.
Thanks. Thank you, Hanuman, for taking through on the drivers need and need for an integrated digital platform as well. And of course, the unique Sonata's methodology to digital transformation, what we call as platformation. And thank you. So thank you, speakers, for covering various aspects and insights. So I would request if you all can come online on your webcam as well. So now we open for the Q&A sessions, and you can post your questions in the chat window. And if there are any questions that we are unable to answer due to the time constraints now, we will send across the answers through emails. So you can send us emails on your questions, and we will send replies answering to your questions as well. So let's see and pick up some questions if there are any. Yeah, there is one question from the audience where they have asked, can you tell us your approach to building a digital supply chain roadmap? Where do you start? Does it involve any assets assessment, etc.? I think the question will be to Hanuman. Hanuman, you wanted to take this?
Yeah, sorry. So yes. So essentially, in terms of as I was mentioning, that the key aspect that we have is obviously we look at trying to first do it in multiple phases and stages, right? The first stage is essentially we try to do a quick analysis of the customer and look at what stage are they in right, in terms of their whole digital vision, digital roadmap, and aspects like that. So that is something that we try to do a quick assessment, which would then help us in terms of then working on in terms of what will be the different aspects that we would like to cover. And then once this is done and you understand the place that they are in their whole digital roadmap, then we could look at then doing a much more deeper dive sessions, which would then help in terms of taking this further. And then we actually put down in terms of from a solution footprint, we look at technology architecture, we look at the different other aspects that need to be also be bought into and then we could put down in terms of the roadmap. So that's how we look at it. And what we typically offer for our customers is that yes, I mean, if they are interested, we can then quickly get into a quick session and then take it further from there.
Sure. Thanks, Hanumant. Hope that that answers the question. I can see one more question which has come up. I think this question can be answered by Rami. Does technologies like blockchain are really prevalent now in supply chain? Or we are still looking at a mirage?
Absolutely. I think this is a very good question. And I think Balu reflected on this when he called out the need for supply chain to be built on a single source of truth on consolidated data. And blockchain is a key enabler, or if you allow me to call it, key catalyst for creating the single source of truth. So blockchain can be the new source of truth for a global ERP that allows people across the value chain to write once and never delete. So it can be really a resilient source for accurate data. And we have seen blockchain being used by multiple retailers as well as CPG to enforce certain retail practice on their suppliers. So we use blockchain, for example, to bring in the supplier of the supplier. We use blockchain to ensure the authenticity of products. So when you talk about authenticity of products that are expensive SKUs, the high value fashion retail brands, all of this is allowing retailers to bring further value, not only to their operational practice, but as well in terms of customer satisfaction by leveraging the power of supply, by leveraging the power of blockchain. And again, it's not a myth anymore. So people do think blockchain is all about Bitcoin. It's not only about Bitcoin. Blockchain can be created on a private and public mode, and it can be used across the ecosystem or can be used across single organization for their own benefit of the operational business practice.
Thanks, Rami. For that answers the blockchain related question. I have one more, and I'm going to take another 5 minutes. Sorry for extending this for a few minutes. So this question is on: is end-to-end supply chain visibility possible? In fact, we keep hearing this supply chain visibility in my experience as well. So this question, Balu, you wanted to take this. So the question is end-to-end supply chain visibility possible?
Muted.
Well,
Yeah. Is it okay? Are you able to hear me?
yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, your question is on whether the end-to-end supply chain visibility is possible. The answer is a big yes. But at the same time, I need to actually qualify. I need to add a lot of things in this. The first one is, unless you have a good transaction system is in place, it's not going to be possible. So if you're actually talking about building end-to-end visibility on some shallow system, it's not going to really work out. So you need to have a good transaction system in place. The second one is you also need to have a good culture in place for people to really share information, because people actually see information as their power. They don't actually share information on time, and they feel that they will lose power if they actually share information with other departments or even with the other individual in the same department. So that has to be actually changed. And this visibility is not actually an overnight story. Definitely, you need to spend a lot of time, you need to put in a lot of efforts to really get to the end-to-end visibility. Another thing, based on my experience in working in multinational companies as well as Indian companies, my thought process is you can actually achieve end-to-end visibility provided you have the transaction system, as I mentioned, plus the empowered employees who can actually share with a lot of openness, etc. At the same time, the top management has to be really driving this. So if the CEO or CTO or CXO is actually happy to pick up the phone at 7 o'clock in the morning and then ask the sales manager what is the sales on that day, this is not going to take place. So he has to really be depending on his digital system to really look at what's really going on in the supply chain, other than depending on people. The moment actually he picks up the phone at 7 o'clock and talks to the sales manager or the sales clerk to find out what is the sales last day, you will never be able to achieve this. That's my experience. So I think it has to be actually top driven. It has to be actually a culture in the organization. You need to have some tools and processes in place. So end-to-end supply chain visibility is possible. And I've heard of small and medium enterprises achieving it pretty easily, whereas large organizations, they actually struggle because of complexity and also certain cultural issues. That's my take on this.
Great. And I think I recollect that's where you also mentioned about the control tower view of the supply chain, where if you have such control tower view, then you get a real-time or a near real-time visibility as well. Thanks, Balu.
I think you touched upon a good point. There is another thing which I actually experienced in my last organization. We actually set up a supply chain management office with around half a dozen guys who were actually managing this metadata and master data, etc., etc. And also they were actually looking at the data on a continuous basis. When I say continuous, it is continuous, really, it is not continual. So things actually improved so much, and the loss of sales on account of stockouts actually came down drastically, and they were able to actually do stock transfers across the various locations, and they were able to actually reduce the overall working capital to a great extent, and sales actually shot up. So SCMO, when it was actually set up to start with, there were a lot of doubting Thomases, but after actually seeing it functioning for a year, they said, wow, this is actually the best department in the company. So I think SCMO is another concept which will actually go along with this the smart chain as well as the control towers and those type of things. Thanks for bringing it up. So SCMO is a good concept which large organizations should really try it out.
All right. Thanks, Balu. And in fact, we have a couple of more questions, but due to want of time, we are unable to answer it over here. But what we will do is we will send across the answers through emails. And if there are any additional questions, please get back to us, or you can get back to me or email. My email ID is mentioned in the slide. So with this, we are coming to the end of our session. Thank you very much for attending this webinar, and have a nice evening. Thank you.
Bye-bye.